Unfortunately, we're at a very warped state of the constitutional system. Was George Bush a fluke, or was it more systemic?
President Joe Biden was inaugurated in January of 2021, making him the fourth president to lead the war on terror. And throughout each presidential term, our military has stayed active around the world.
And I'd ask, what authorization is the president using?
In 2001 and 2002, Congress signed into law these authorizations for use of military force, otherwise known as the 2001 AUMF to defeat those associated with the attack on 9/11, and the 2002 AUMF for the Iraq War,
which are so open-ended that they have let 3 presidents over 2 decades claim that they can carry out any operation pretty much anywhere in the world without being meaningfully stopped by Congress.
In her new book, The Politics of War Powers, Professor Sarah Burns explains why these laws are still relevant today, even though the terror threats they were written to combat have changed dramatically and lessened significantly.
Al-Qaeda is not really operating the way it used to in Afghanistan, and we know at this point that the Taliban isn't going anywhere.
So why can the president still cite these 20-year-old documents to bypass Congress? And what difference does that make? This is how a clear declaration of war used to look. The language is specific and direct. Congress is telling the president that it is authorizing war against the imperial government of Japan.
Implying, this is very important, that this is not transferable to other future governments, nor is it us against the people of Japan.
It also clearly states that the conflict must be brought to a successful termination. This key language is missing from both the 2001 and 2002 AUMF, and the reason why can be traced back to a policy paper from 1950 called NSC 68.
In this document, it says that the Soviets are only going to respond to force. So our only answer is to just get a huge military, so we are also an 800-pound gorilla, just smashing things all over the place.
Because of the Soviet threat and belief that military force was their only solution, Congress ended up making a lot of concessions, greatly expanding the president's power to use the military how he saw fit.
And since that time, we've seen presidents find lots of creative ways of claiming that they have war powers that are absolutely nowhere in the Constitution.
Following the Vietnam War, it seemed Congress was ready to rein in the president's authority by drafting the War Powers Resolution of 1973.
And what was supposed to be some kind of constraint on presidential action actually is much more of a permission slip.
The War Powers Resolution included some familiar things, like bringing back formal declarations of war by Congress, but it also included this.
Presidents now have a permission slip to engage in military operations as long as they do so within 60 to 90 days, and they don't have too large of a footprint.
And congressional language in resolutions since then has only gotten looser.
The 2001 authorization for the use of military force gave Bush the power to go after anyone related to or responsible for 9/11. That was then interpreted much more broadly to mean terrorists in general. But the one, the pièce de résistance of Congress shirking its responsibility, was the 2002 AUMF for the Iraq War.
Terms like necessary and appropriate and national security can be interpreted to justify just about anything.
We also see that it's the security threat posed by Iraq, not the government of Iraq, not Saddam Hussein, Iraq.
All of this vague language is compounding into decades of precedent any executive can draw from to start a military operation unilaterally. And we see how much a president can do with this during Obama's campaign against ISIS in 2014.
We will conduct a systematic campaign of airstrikes against these terrorists. Today, America is coming to help.
There was so much instability in Iraq and Syria and a few other parts of the region that ISIS had really taken over. So at this point, Obama essentially felt compelled to act. So he just starts bombing mostly Iraq, to a certain extent Syria. So he's acting as if it's not a sustained bombing campaign, but discrete examples of a bombing campaign. And he's likely doing this because of the War Powers Resolution. By September, it became very apparent that there was no way they were going to deal with it in any sort of short order. So that's when he started turning to the 2001 and 2002 AUMFs. Okay, so this is the first very clear and big example of a president using authorizations that are more than a decade old in order to carry out a bombing campaign against an entirely different group of people.
But it wouldn't be the last example.
Soleimani was plotting, but we caught him and terminated him.
Presidential war powers have been steadily expanding since the Cold War, throwing our constitutional system out of balance, and examining this should concern everyone.
As Rosa Brooks noted in 2013, Right now, we have an executive branch making a claim that it has the right to kill anyone, anywhere on Earth, at any time, for secret reasons, based on secret evidence, in a secret process, undertaken by unidentified officials, and that frightens me.